Whew. That's fat. What a scripting. Let's get to work. Amazing. Okay. is good for studying. So we're going to play some Hans Zimmer. So I get my exam work done. And we might focus on anatomy today. Let's try. Pretty intense for studying. I might turn it down a little bit. Oh, this is dramatic studying, but let's go. Alright, what have I done? I need to probably talk so I don't get copyright strike for music. Alright, let's go. Okay, so let's look at gastro and nat. So I haven't done peptic ulcer. And we'll get this up for peptic ulcer today. Duodenal ulcer. Let's set a timer as well. Might go timer. 8 minutes. Put one a little bit down. Okay, peptic ulcer. 50-year-old male presents to the emergency department following a few months of intermittent epigastric abdominal pain, and the pain has become dramatically worse in the past few hours. Epigastric 50-year-old male. On examination, he's tachycardic, he's hypotensive with a temperature of 37.8, so he's afebrile, mildly. He also has a rebound tenderness and guarding. What is my provisional and differential diagnoses? My provisional diagnosis, given the presence of hemodynamic instability on the background of epigastric pain, would be that of a peptic ulcer that has perforated. I would like to exclude other life-threatening causes of abdominal pain, particularly in the epigastric region. I'm concerned about Boerhaave's ruptured esophagus. I'm also concerned about pancreatitis, abdominal aortic aneurysms, and then other causes of abdominal pain can include benign causes such as gastroenteritis. I'd like to exclude a lower MI on lower lobe pneumonia, given the epigastric nature of the pain. And other causes may also include biliary colic, given the patient's age, diverticulitis, and malignancy. what investigations would you perform? I would begin with bedside investigations, including a bedside ECG. I may also like to do a VBG looking at lactate, given the patient appears to be in shock and hemodynamically unstable. I would also like to get blood glucose, and lab investigations could include a full blood count, CRP, looking for evidence of infection, and then I'd proceed to EUCs, lipase, assessing renal function, pancreatitis, LFTs, look for any evidence of biliary pathology, and I would also like to do a cross match, given that I believe the patient may be hemorrhaging and may need prompt blood transfusion. And imaging could include a ultrasound of the abdomen, the Doppler, looking for evidence of an abdominal aortic aneurysm, and we may proceed then to a CT abdomen, and may like to do it with contrast, looking for any looking at the arterial integrity. Explain the changes in the pain experience and potential complications of ruptured duodenal ulcer. The dramatic worsening of this pain could indicate a rupturing of the duodenal ulcer, or the peptic ulcer, and the constant pain may be due to ulceration over time caused by hydrochloric acid irritating and damaging the mucosa of the small intestine. Potential complications, there may be leakage of blood into the peritoneum, and this may result in peritonitis. There may be loss of blood, can lead to hypovolemic shock, which can eventually lead to patient death due to end organ dysfunction. The ulcer may also become infected, superimposed infection, and sepsis may ensue. List the reflections of the peritoneum. The peritoneum consists of a parietal and visceral layer. The parietal layer lining the abdominal wall, and the visceral layer lining the organs, and there is mesentery that attaches to the peritoneum, which is double layered peritoneum containing vessels that will then hold abdominal viscus in place. What are the peritoneal recesses and potential sites of infection of the abdomen? Epiploic foramen. No clue, I'd butcher that question. If there was abdominal trauma, where would blood pool? Holy shit. There's also sacs. There's a greater and lesser sac. List the relations of the duodenum. The duodenum lies inferior to the right of the stomach and travels anterior or posterior to the pancreas, and there is the large intestines that envelope the duodenum. Spleen laterally, you have the colic flexure, the splenic flexure, and the right colic flexure. I'm just getting destroyed. What are the complications of peritonitis? Infection, purulent discharge, dissemination, sepsis, localized invasion of infection. Duodenum foregut or midgut, well, halfway through the duodenum is foregut, and the remainder from D2 is midgut. What's the blood supply of the duodenum? Since it's a foregut structure, it's supplied by branches of the celiac trunk, and in particular there is a superior pancreatic or duodenal artery which will supply the superior duodenum and the associated pancreas, and then there is a inferior pancreatic or duodenal artery which is a branch of the superior mesenteric artery. What is the nerve innervation of the duodenum? Plexi? Don't know. Nervous. No. Duodenum. Nerve supply. Nope. Got destroyed. Fail. Alright, let's see what I got wrong. Let's see. What did I mention or miss? My original diagnosis is bacterial contamination. Right, so if he's got rebound tenderness or guarding, you're concerned about peritonitis. Rebound tenderness and guarding is indicative of peritonitis. Peritonitis, right? If there is any moving patient, you're concerned about a peritonitis, whereas a renal colic, they're always moving around. Okay, what is my provisional differential? Peritonitis following a rupture, bacterial contamination of, is peritonitis following a ruptured peptic ulcer. And this is on the basis of severe abdominal pain, characteristic signs of peritonitis. My differential diagnoses, we said GI tumors, acute pancreatitis, gastroenteritis, and GORD, reflux disease. But sudden pain, no, you still have to consider GORD. GORD as one of my differentials that I missed. And then vascular, I love how they're breaking it down. So abdominal should be life threats, which is your MI, your lower lobe pancreatitis, your dissection. I didn't mention type B dissections. They would tend to be thoracic aorta. Right, so type B dissections, abdominal aortic aneurysm, pancreatitis, myocardial infarct, lower lobe pneumonia. That's what we got. Right, okay. What else do we have? Mesenteric ischemia and biliary colic. I did mention that's fine. Pericarditis not needed. What investigations would I perform? So what is a diagnostic investigation for a peptic ulcer? Bedside ECG. We said PCU, CCRP. Mentioned LFTs, but amylase lipase are also TROPS. I didn't mention TROPS. If we have a patient who has upper abdominal or chest pain, you always must do an ECG and troponin. Cannot miss troponin, so the patient can deteriorate from MI. So ECG troponins. Right. Chest X-ray for imaging. Yep. I should work off my differentials, but an abdominal X-ray to exclude a peptic ulcer and detect pneumoperitoneum. So if you do a peptic ulcer, there's going to be air leakage from the stomach into the peritoneum. So you would visualize that. Forgot that. So chest X-ray. What does a peptic ulcer chest X-ray even look like? Let's see. Is peritonitis, rebound. This is surgical emergency and require ball halves, cholecystitis, pancreatitis, appendicitis, acute intestinal ischemia. So mesenteric ischemia, diverticulitis, bowel obstruction, inferior MI, ectopic contortion, right? So I didn't mention ball halves. I'll mention that here. That we're also concerned about ball halves. Bedside, ECG, CRP. Explain the changes in pain. so ECG, EUCs. If in shock, the urea to creatinine ratio is greater than 100. EUCs for a urea creatinine ratio. No, I completely forgot that. Right, for a GI bleed, for a GI bleed, the EUC is greater than 100 to 1. If you're in my normochromic normocytic anemia, and you'll need to transfuse the hemoglobin. So why else do I care about this? Because the patient's hemoglobin is less than 80, we would also need cross-match to transfuse. Cross-match for transfusion. Yeah. So EUCs, if urea is greater than 100, it indicates GI bleed. LFTs, lipase, VBG as well. Did we mention VBG? How do they not have a VBG here? This is ridiculous. VBG. Shock. We want to look at lactate, right? Lactate. And then might need coags as well, so cross match and grip and hold. So do you order both? Grip and hold and coags? And coags for surge. If we're going to do a cross match, we need coags as well if they're going for surgery. Grip and hold. And cross match and coags. Surgical emergency, this one. Right. What is a peritoneum? It's a serous membrane that lines the abdominal wall as a parietal peritoneum. It's reflected from the body wall to visceral peritoneum to form the outermost or serosal layer. The peritoneum minimizes friction, it resists infection, and it stores fat. It has 3 roles. It minimizes friction. So the peritoneum is a serous membrane that lines the abdominal wall, and it's reflected to form a visceral or serosal layer. And it minimizes friction, it resists infection, and it stores fat. Makes sense. If you're serosal, you're secreting fluid as well, so it's going to be quite moist, not have friction. It would resist infection, stores fat, allows a free movement of abdominal visceral organs in response to it allows a free movement of your viscera in response to injury or infection. It exudes fluid that walls off and localizes. So in the case of infection, it's going to exude fluid that's going to wall off and it's going to localize and combat infection. So the peritoneum is a double layer of, you'd call that epithelium, right? Both are made up of single squamous epithelial cells. Mesothelial. Makes sense. Why is he feeling pain? Say it was ruptured. First in gastric duodenal ulcers, the tender broad abdominal generalized peritonitis. Broad perforations caused by erosion of the ulcer through the stomach. Can cause shock and peritonitis, upper GI bleeding, and the ulcer erodes the wall of a gastroduodenal blood vessel. So when an ulcer perforates, it doesn't necessarily have to bleed unless there is a vessel posterior to it that it's eroded into. That makes sense. Penetration occurs when the chronic ulcer penetrates. The entire thickness penetrates. It occurs when the chronic ulcer penetrates the entire thickness. What that even mean? Duodenal ulcer penetration. Ah, so penetration is perforation. Penetration is when it also penetrates the entire thickness straight to an adjacent organ, whereas perforation is erosion, which results and opens into the abdominal cavity. So we can have perforation, we can have a GI bleed, we can have penetration of the ulcer into a localized structure such as the pancreas, and we can have gastric outlet obstruction as well. So duodenal ulcer causes gastric outlet obstruction. This is in the pyloric channel, first part of duodenal responsible for outlet obstruction. Let's see. So an ulcer that erodes and to the pylorus are going to cause. Okay, that makes sense. So we are going to have penetration of the ulcer. Gastric outlet obstruction typically occurs at the pylorus. That's right, gastric outlet obstruction typically occurs at the pylorus and causes narrowing. It's going to reflux gastric acid contents. That makes sense. Okay. What else do we got? For GI bleed, perforation, penetration. Maybe I should get a picture of penetration real quick. There we go. Copy image. Okay. List the reflections of peritoneum. Peritoneum is a double layer of is a serous membrane. It's mesothelium, which is squamous epithelial cells. Is it stratified? It has to be stratified. You can't have any music recommendations for me? Cheers, David. And why does it say 5-hour study? You could create a studio. Put like 2 hours? How long did I study? Say 1.5. Gas cap. Okay. Simple squamous epithelial cells, right, interesting. So reflection of the peritoneum, the visceral and parietal layer. Simple squamous epithelial cells and the parietal and visceral peritoneum are continuous, and it's derived from somatic mesoderm. and the somatic nerve supply, and that's why you get a well-localized pain. Don't remember what the embryo layers are. Somatic mesoderm. What a somatic mesoderm is, the outer layer formed from the split of the lateral plate mesoderm. Somatic mesoderm. Yep, it's from the lateral plate mesoderm. So there's somatic and splanchnic. I've searched this up so many times. What does splanchnic mean? Relating to the viscera. Of course. Splanchnic. So does viscous, so does... okay. Splanchnic. What I'll do is go here. Where is it? It's too much, way too much. Notochord. Praxial mesoderm, intermediate mesoderm, lateral plate mesoderm, and it's derived from the lateral plate. Cool. I'm just gonna... Notochord is under the neural tube, and gastrulation is when the 3 layers of germ cells pass through. So what I'll do is just paste it. Why not? Let's make it smaller, so I know it's like pretty useless. Peritoneum, it's a membrane, it's parietal visceral layers. It's derived from your lateral plate mesoderm, somatic mesoderm, and thus has a somatic nerve supply, which is very localized. Sensitive to pressure, pain, temperature. It covers most of the abdominal viscera. It's derived from splanchnic mesoderm. So the parietal peritoneum has very localized, it's from somatic mesoderm, so it's a somatic nerve supply, so it's a well-localized pain. Whereas visceral peritoneum covers the viscera, it's derived from splanchnic mesoderm, which is also lateral plate mesoderm, but it gets an autonomic nervous supply, and thus it's poorly localized pain. And that's why the foregut we notice as epigastric pain, midgut is umbilical pain, hindgut is just hypogastric pain. That makes sense. Let me just search left hypochondrium to see if I'm right. Yeah, it's iliac fossa, flank, and hypochondrium. Is that right? I've seen this way too much time. Yeah, okay. Retroperitoneal. Yep. Visceral, splanchnic. The peritoneal cavity is a potential space between visceral and parietal peritoneum. It normally contains a small amount of lubricating fluid. Potential space between parietal and visceral peritoneum. Yeah. Right. Okay. It's a potential space, and the intraperitoneal organs are enveloped by visceral peritoneum anteriorly and posteriorly, and only in the anterior surface, and that's the stomach, the liver, the spleen, the small bowel, the transverse colon, first part of the duodenum, and pancreas tail, whereas the esophagus is retroperitoneal. So is a rectum retroperitoneal. There's the kidneys that are retroperitoneal. So the esophagus and the rectum share that retroperitoneal location with the kidneys, and the head and the body of the pancreas. So if I could see how good my memory is, the intraperitoneal organs include that of the transverse colon, the first part of the duodenum. There is also the stomach. There is also the spleen and the tail of the pancreas, whereas the retroperitoneal structures include the esophagus, the remainder of the small intestines after the first part of the duodenum, the ascending, descending sigmoid colon, the kidneys, the rectum, right? Yeah. Okay. Got it. Okay, let's go. So mesentery. So mesentery is just the double layered of peritoneum that will connect the viscous to the abdominal wall and its parietal peritoneum. Yeah, that makes sense. When we reflect the visceral peritoneum onto the abdominal wall, we get parietal peritoneum. That makes sense. Now, what's all the rest of this stuff? I need to go to duodenum. There's 716 damn models. So just, how do you Google search this? I don't want surface anatomy. Let's filter. Let's go to abdomen. View content. And no, I don't want the muscles. I don't want the vessel supply. I don't want the inguinal canal. That's pretty good. Greater and lesser sacs. I want that. Yes, please. The abdominal viscera. Let's open that up. We'll start with this. Okay, got it. So serosa. Right. It's your small intestine. We got our ascending colon, transverse, descending. Makes sense. Right, and we can see that the ascending and descending colon are retroperitoneal because the posterior surface is not lined in peritoneum because they're against the body wall. And the first part of the duodenum is also not retroperitoneal because it's here, and the stomach is also not retroperitoneal. That makes sense. And here, what we got here, this is a falciform ligament of the liver. We've got the liver itself and its beauty, and the spleen. Check that out. Quite cool, quite cool. Can we enlarge this? Oh, it just gets bigger. It's alright. Why not? Just make it a bit smaller, this one. Right. What's this? Cirrhosis of the stomach. Makes sense. Yeah, descending urinary bladder. We know femoral artery, psoas major. That would be the psoas major. And then your iliacus is there. Psoas major, iliacus. Where do you get the nerve supply from? Iliacus is L2 to L4, I believe. Nerve roots. Psoas major, I think, is T12 to L2. Something of that sort. Nerve supply. Round ligament of the liver. Or ligamentum teres. Or the round ligament of the liver. Or the ligamentum teres is there. No, I don't want abdominal viscera. How do we go back? Just gotta go back to Atlas. This thing takes ages to load. No. I want to go through not inguinal canal just yet, but what about the actual omentum? There we are. A fatty layer of sheath that sits over. Got my abdominal muscles, and then posterior to that, we've got our greater omentum, which is an apron that seems to be sitting, which attaches to the greater curvature. So the omental apron, and this cirrhosis of the stomach, costal cartilages, iliacus, psoas, iliacus. You can see it goes from the pelvic brim down, whereas the psoas is more interesting. Serosa, round ligament, obturator, interpubic disc. How do we go back? Come on, I can't only do one case in a whole hour. Let's go. No, content. No, I just want Atlas. Alright. We want not vessels, not spermatic cord, not the omentum. I want the sacs, the lesser and greater sacs of the abdominal cavity. That I don't understand all that well. Can I rotate? Ah, my god, I'm shook. Holy sh. Okay, that's insane. So you can see that's our transverse colon. We have our small intestines. We've got our rectum posteriorly and the bladder Oh my god, this is beautiful. And aorta, and on the right we can see an inferior vena cava. So the good doctor shows every single time. Pancreas. But where are the sacs? I'm gonna just search. Where is the lesser sac? What? Where is the sac? Muscular of the stomach. Yeah, okay, sure. Okay. I want to know the sacs. Okay, what's the next question? Reflection of the peritoneum can be categorized into mesenteries, ommenta, and ligament. Mesenteries are peritoneal folds that will suspend to the intestines, or suspend to visci, and attach to the abdominal wall. And a double fold supporting the small intestine is the mesentery. The mesentery. So mesenteries are peritoneal folds that attach abdominal visci to the body wall. Your demesentery is the double layer peritoneum that connects the small intestines to the abdominal wall. And the mesentery supporting transverse sigmoid and appendix are the mesoappendix, sigmoid mesocolon, and transverse mesocolon. So that's mesenteries. Now ommenta are okay, that makes sense. Mesenteries are double peritoneum supporting the intestines. And then peritoneal folds that link the stomach with other viscera are the ommenta. The ommenta are double layer peritoneum that connects the stomach to other organs. And the lesser omentum extends from the liver. Where's our liver? I can barely see it. I need to go back. Pretty cool. Where's our spleen, duodenum, intestines, nocical junction, peritoneum, along the kidneys, distribution of the celiac trunk, mesentery confirmed. Vessels, renal, lymphatics. Does it have everything? I want the mesentery. And I click that, and it's two folds of peritoneum, this connective tissue and neurovascular supply that travels with the mesentery. The mesentery is a double-layered peritoneum that attaches the intestines to the body wall, and the mesentery is for the small intestine, and mesocolon is for the large intestine. Got it? Mesentery. Ommenta connect the stomach to other abdominal viscera. The lesser omentum is from the liver to the lesser curvature of the stomach. Can I see this in this coronal section? Can't even see the liver. Oh yeah, no, what am I saying? Can't see the liver. Is that it? Bring that up. I'm gonna quickly get some water. Let's go back. Wait. I'll be right back. 1 second. Okay. Mentor, stomach, greater and lesser omentum. The lesser omentum connects the less curvature of the stomach to the first part of the extends from the liver to the less curvature of the stomach in the first part of the duodenum. Makes sense. And it consists of the hepatoduodenal ligament and the gastrohepatic ligament. How do I remember this? Hepatoduodenal is the right and left border is the hepatogastric. Well, that makes sense because liver's here, stomach's here, so left border will be the gastrohepatic. Hepatoduodenal will descend in the right to the duodenum. So sort of memorizing, visualize. Okay, and it contains a portal vein, the bile duct, the lymph nodes, lymph vessels, and the hepatic plexus of that's so much. It contains lymphatic vessels, the bile duct, and the portal vein. So the lesser omentum, what structures travel in the lesser omentum? There is the portal vein, bile duct, lymph vessels, and nerves. So portal vein, bile duct, lymph nodes, lymph nodes, and their vessels and nerves. So the structures that travel in the lesser omentum include the bile duct, the portal vein, the lymph nodes and their associated vessels, and nerve plexi. Greater omentum extends from the greater curvature of the stomach and passes in front of the small intestines as an apron, and it turns on itself and ascends to the transverse colon and attaches to the posterior abdominal wall and closes that part of the intestine. Kind of like remove things. It passes in front, attached to the posterior abdominal wall that passes in front of the small intestine, it turns on itself and ascends to the transverse colon and attaches to the posterior abdominal wall that encloses that part of it turns on itself and ascends to the transverse colon attached to the posterior abdominal wall. Yeah. So you need to know the borders. It contains the gastroepiploic vessels, the left and right gastroepiploic. That makes sense. Gastroepiploic vessels travel that supply the greater curvature of the stomach. Left gastroepiploic should arise from the splenic, I believe, splenic artery. The right gastroepiploic should arise from, I think, is it left gastric? I think right gastroepiploic. Right? It's the nerve supply. Celiac trunk branches. How are we gonna be a surgeon if we don't know that? Let's see, there's a better image. So we have our hepatic artery, common hepatic goes to hepatic artery proper. We have a celiac trunk. And we also have your splenic artery that's traveling, giving off your short gastric arteries. And we have the left gastroepiploic, which is arising from... And where does the right gastroepiploic come from? Oh no, it's a branch here. Where does it come from? The splenic, yeah. So right there, it's a branch of the splenic. The right gastroepiploic doesn't come from the left gastric. It comes from the gastroduodenal. And that's better. So we have a left gastric artery. That's going to give off, actually it's going to supply the lesser curvature. You have your hepatic artery. It's going to give off a gastroduodenal artery. And that will also give off the right gastroepiploic and gastroduodenal. And then here we have a left gastroepiploic and our short gastric artery. Splenic, short gastric, left gastroepiploic, celiac trunk. Common hepatic will give off your right gastroepiploic, gastroduodenal, and your right gastroepiploic. Splenic artery to the spleen. We have our left gastric, which will give off the lesser curvature, a cystic artery, and your right gastric artery to because then after that, which will then supply the lesser curvature. Anastomose with the left gastric artery and innervate the lesser curvature. Okay. Its left border is the gastrosplenic ligament. Yeah, look at greater omentum. Yeah, there's a greater omentum, and its left border is, we said, was a gastrosplenic ligament. Is that the left border? Doesn't even have gastrosplenic in this. Should be able to pick apart this stuff and remove it. Why can't I remove anything? Okay. It's okay. Alright, yeah, we'll just move on now. Ligaments, the gastrosplenic, which goes from the stomach to the spleen. It's the left border of the greater omentum, and it contains the short gastric. Short gastric is a branch of the splenic artery, and the left gastroepiploic, which is also a branch of your splenic artery. So the gastrosplenic contains the branches of the splenic artery, which is your short gastric. This is a meme. Okay. Splenorenal, leorenal. Spleen to the kidney, splenic artery. So the splenorenal ligaments and leorenal ligaments connect the spleen to the kidney. Splenorenal and leorenal ligaments. And then we have a gastrophrenic ligament. Stomach to the diaphragm, we have a greater omentum equals a gastrocolic ligament to the stomach, which also transverse colon, and a falciform ligament. Okay, my brain is thinking too little. Falciform ligament is from the thoracic diaphragm, the anterior abdominal wall. Just gonna go to the next slide. Mesentery, small intestines, jejunum and ileum, mesocolon, omentum, double A peritoneum, the gastrosplenic, the left border, gastrocolic adheres to the transverse colon. What are the peritoneal recesses? Hepatogastric, hepatoduodenal, broad ligament. It's the uterus to either side. And hepatoduodenal, gastrohepatic, hepatoduodenal, falciform ligament connects your thoracic diaphragm, anterior abdominal wall to the liver. There is the greater omentum, which has the gastrocolic ligament connecting to the stomach, and then attached to the right transverse colon. Let's see, going this. Okay, good. And then we have the leaner spleen. So many. Okay, what are the peritoneal recesses? What are the peritoneal recesses? There are the greater and lesser sacs. What are the lesser sacs? What are the sacs? This is something I never got my head around in 5 years in med school, and now I need to know it. So don't be a dumbass. Let's see. I need to go back. out of this. I might go a little bit longer than one. I just want to finish this case. There's no point just putting times to learning if we're not going to finish what we're doing. To the end. Okay. Let's go. That's a sax. Turn this bad boy around to this side. Okay, where is the lesser sac? So, just orienting ourselves, we can see the stomach. We can see there is a liver and there is a supracolic. Okay. Greater sac is a supracolic and infracolic. Oh, so the greater sac is that whole region there. That is the greater sac, the supracolic. And there is an infracolic region that travels all here. Okay, and that's the greater omentum, which has been cut off. But then behind the greater omentum will be your intestines. And it will then go back to your transverse colon, which is sitting right there. Greater omentum. And so all of that, even going posteriorly right there, you can see, you can kind of put your finger right through there and up there. It travels all the way up to the back side of the transverse colon. Right, transverse. Okay, so right there is the transverse mesocolon, so it can go all the way back up. So there's a greater sac, which has a supracolic and infracolic compartment, and there is a lesser sac. And it's right to the left and right based on the mesentery. Yeah, makes sense. There is the mesentery. Okay, there is the greater sac, lesser sac. There's a greater sac, supracolic, infracolic, and lesser sac is a greater omentum. I'm trying to find where the lesser sac is. Find the attachment. Okay, let's see. Supracolic inferior recess, detachment of the transverse mesocolon. And there are your paracolic gutters. Paracolic gutters. So para is next to there. I can see the paracolic gutters right there. Paracolic gutters. There is your greater sac. And I should probably open up what he's saying. I need to make this bigger. We read that, but I want to see this. Lesser curvature, pataduodenal. That's an epiploic foramen right there, which is formed posterior to the lesser omentum, which is a gastrohepatic, hepatoduodenal on the right, greater omentum. There, this is gold. Let's see. Epiploic foramen, this is a gastrohepatic, hepatoduodenal, gastrocolic ligament, and then you have your gastrocolic ligament, and then you have your spleen. What is that called? Gastrosplenic. Surely it's gastrosplenic ligament, right? Yeah, gastrosplenic ligament on the left. Gastrocolic ligament and gastrosplenic ligament is the two. So that's the origin, okay. And then you have your epiploic foramen posteriorly, and then you have your, that's not too hard. What do we got? We've got our liver here. We've got our caudate lobe, quadrate lobe, fundus of the gallbladder. This liver is going to be sitting down to the right, so the caudate lobe is inferior, the quadrate lobe is superior, it makes sense. And then there is the left and right lobes. So it must be like this. Yeah. Okay. Quadrate lobe, portal vein. Portal hepatis contains the two portal hepatic arteries and one portal vein. Portal vein is formed from the superior mesenteric vein and the splenic vein, I believe. Sad pucker, retroperitoneal organs. There is your suprarenal, there's your aorta and IVC, there's your duodenum, pancreas, ureters, colon, ascending, descending kidneys, esophagus, rectum. Suprarenal glands, your aorta, IVC, duodenum, second and third part, your pancreas, ureters, colon, kidneys, esophagus, and your rectum. The retroperitoneal organs include the suprarenal glands, the aorta and the inferior vena cava, the duodenum, the second and third parts of the duodenum, the portal vein, the ureters, the colon ascending and descending, the kidney, the rectum, and the esophagus. Go for 5 more minutes. I'm just gonna put 10 more minutes. Okay. I'm going. Let me put it on YouTube as well. I gotta change my time. So make it not 1. We'll count it down to 1:20. I'm really pushing it. Start. Let's change the Hans Zimmer song. From Cornfield Chase to what else we got? It's been a pretty good song. I see why people listen to Hans Zimmer for their work. Let's see if there's another song I know. Time popular releases. Interstellar, Hans Zimmer. No, we'll keep it. Okay, so I know all the retroperitoneal organs. I just need to understand greater and lesser omentum. So greater omentum is there is a greater sac, a lesser sac. There is a supracolic and infracolic recess. And it's defined by attachment of the transverse mesocolon. So that's a transverse colon there, and posteriorly we have the transverse mesocolon. and it's formed subhepatic recess. No, I'm not looking there. Supracolic is transmitted the colon and the posterior abdominal wall with the supracolic compartment. Supracolic compartment above and the infracolic. Supracolic compartment above and the infracolic compartment below. Ah, so the border between the supracolic and infracolic recess of the greater sac is the transverse mesocolon. So so the greater sac is anterior and is the region of space between the anterior abdominal viscus and the anterior abdominal wall, and it can be divided into a supracolic and infracolic recess, and this is by the transverse mesocolon, which is the peritoneum or the mesentery of the colon. And then we have the paracolic gutters, which are at either end, which are lateral to each of the ascending and descending colon respectively. And we have a subhepatic recess, which is a recess between the liver and the transverse colon. So that's a subhepatic recess right there. So I can see that's the liver and that's the transverse colon. So they've called this space here the subhepatic recess. Kind of goes back. And it makes sense. There's a subphrenic recess, which is between the kidneys and the diaphragm, but the kidneys are not visible here. I have to go back. Turn that. Posterior abdominal wall. I've got viscous surface, posterior surface, bowel duct, peritoneum, and overlying structures. Don't want overlying structures. About the kidneys. Liver and the diaphragm. Why not? Look at this one. So the subphrenic recess is between the diaphragm and the kidneys, and that did not help because I already visualized them. So the recesses, we have the greater and the lesser. So what's the lesser sac then? What is the lesser sac then? I've gone through the greater sac, porta hepatis, contents of the porta hepatis. That's just your bowel duct, your portal vein, your two hepatic arteries, right? Porta hepatis. Yeah, it's got deep transverse fissure. It's in the posterior aspect of the right lobe. Yeah, what structure is in the porta hepatis? There's the portal vein, right and left hepatic arteries, the right and left hepatic ducts. But I want to know a specific question. Acute abdominal pain. Exposure gastric contents, and it causes generalized peritonitis because of food, acid, and that makes sense, and the irritation of the parietal peritoneum overlying muscles. What's a mesolication? Ulcers likely bleed. Posterior ulcers in the first part of the duodenum. Posterior ulcers in the first part of the duodenum, the body of the stomach. So ulcers located in the body of the stomach and the posterior aspect of the first part of the duodenum are most likely to bleed. This is pretty cool. This is what GenSurg is about. Body of the stomach, ulcers likely to bleed, are posterior ulcers that connect to the first part of the duodenum and the stomach. So first part of the duodenum. Stomach. First part of the duodenum is your gastroduodenal artery. And your pancreatic duodenal. And the stomach branches of the splenic artery as it travels to the stomach and supplies the left gastroepiploic and the short gastric supplies the fundus. Okay, so what's the location of this ulcer? Ulcers likely to bleed are located on the posterior aspect of the first part of the duodenum or the stomach, and this is due to the gastroduodenal artery traveling there in the first part of the duodenum posteriorly. And posterior to the stomach, we see the splenic artery traveling across. And its tributary is a short gastric artery and your left gastroepiploic. The gastroduodenal artery is likely to rupture, and less commonly the superior pancreatic or duodenal artery, which is a branch of your gastroduodenal artery. Ulcers likely to perforate. It's bleeding ulcers, also likely to perforate anterior ulcers in the first part of the duodenum. So if you're posterior in the first part of the duodenum, you're going to bleed. If you're anterior in the first part of the duodenum, you're going to perforate. Also was found to be in the first part of the duodenum, which makes sense. Where in the duodenum was the lesions through the anterior wall, causing epigastric pain, spilling of contents of the greater sac, causing a generalized chemical peritonitis. And the duodenum is a C-shaped structure that extends from L1, L3, and is continuous proximally with the pylorus and distally with the jejunum. Makes sense. How will I remember duodenum is L1 to L3? Got it. L1, L3. 3 plus 1 is 4. 4 for D, fourth letter of the alphabet. L1 to L3 is a duodenum. Okay, L1 to L3 is a duodenum. First 2 centimeters are contained between the peritoneum of the greater and the lesser omentum, and the remainder is lesser. First 2.5 centimeters are contained between the peritoneum of the greater omentum and the lesser omentum. Oh, shit. C-shaped structure. First part, second part, third part, fourth part. And all envelope, and then we have the head of the pancreas. You have the right kidney, the left kidney, L1 to L3. That makes sense, T12 to... Okay. Aorta, inferior vena cava, the kidneys, suprarenal glands, and we can see the superior mesenteric artery and vein that travel down. And there's your pancreatic or duodenal arteries. Right, so your duodenal flexure is around the head of the pancreas, and laterally we can see both kidneys, the superior mesenteric artery and vein will travel anterior to the third part of the duodenum. First part is superior, right? First part of the duodenum is all the way up there, and it will connect down like that. Superior, we've got the liver. And then posterior, we've got the common bile duct, the IVC. Yep. And we've got the hepatoduodenal ligament. We've got the IVC portal vein posterior to the duodenum. And second part, we've got the descending, which is anterior to it. Is the transverse colon? What? True. Then bends around and it will travel around like that. So in the head of the pancreas is there. So it's traveled posterior. So anteriorly you have the transverse colon there. And it's going to travel then to the right kidney posteriorly, the ureters. Superior. Horizontal. You have your kidneys and the descending posteriorly, ascending anterior. Okay, it then travels superior, descends horizontal, descends onto the kidneys posteriorly. Why don't I just look at a damn model of duodenum? Duodenum in situ. So much easier. Why did I not do this? Okay, this is the duodenum, all so much better. Okay, so the first part of the duodenum posteriorly, we see the IVC, and we can also see, what else is it? Common bile duct of the liver. The liver's not shown, but the liver and gallbladder are also the anterior structures. The liver's going to be anterior to it, but posterior. So liver's anterior, we've removed it to see the duodenum. Posterior, we can see the IVC. And the second part of the duodenum posteriorly, we see the kidneys, and that's descending. The third part is going to be the transverse section. Anterior to that is going to be the superior mesenteric artery and vein. And your fourth part ascends again, and you'll see the stomach that's going to be anterior to it, and posterior to it we can see is your aorta. Yeah, your aorta is posterior to it, and we also have the psoas muscle. So if I had to repeat that, the first part of the duodenum is a transverse section. Anterior to it will be the liver. Posterior, we can see the inferior vena cava. Then this will descend into the second part of the duodenum. Second part of duodenum is going to be posterior to the colon, in this case the transverse colon. So it will travel behind it. And posterior to this is going to be the kidneys. We then have the third part of the duodenum, which will then traverse horizontally, in which the superior mesenteric artery and vein will travel anterior to it. And the aorta and the inferior vena cava should be posterior. Then we have the fourth part of the duodenum, which will then travel superiorly, and anterior to this will be the stomach, and posterior will have aorta in your psoas major muscles. Yes. Take a damn picture of this. I don't need to memorize tables for anatomy, it's so stupid. List the relations of the duodenum. So much better. Okay. What are the complications of peritonitis? Mortality 10 to 40% for peritoneal cavity can be. Mortality rates is 40% from peritonitis. Can spread intraperitoneal infections and cause abscesses, sepsis. Duodenum is a foregut structure. It's part of the foregut and the midgut junction occurs at the major duodenal papilla. First 2.5% is supplied by first part. D1 is your right gastroepiploic, and your right gastric by the gastroduodenal artery, which gives us your right gastroepiploic, which will also supply the first part of the duodenum. The remaining second part will be the superior pancreaticoduodenal and then inferior pancreaticoduodenal. So second part to D4, first, second, third, fourth. The nerve innervation, and it's your celiac and superior mesenteric trunks, and then your posterior vagal trunks. Posterior vagal trunks. I've got maybe 8 more minutes, let's say. Let me quickly smash out this case. I just want to very quickly know what the lesser suck is, so my concerns have been alleviated. As a mental bursa is a cavity of the abdomen that is formed by the lesser and greater omentum. That's the greater omentum. What's the lesser sac? There's a cavity formed by the greater omentum and the lesser omentum. It's a cavity formed by the greater and lesser omentum. Oh my lord. Now I got it. It's stuck. Greater and lesser omentum. Let me screenshot this and add this in. And then I will Control V. Alright, let's do this one case and we're done. close everything, so I smash it out because I know the answers. And then I can sleep. Or eat and sleep. Well, I should probably hide that, but let's go. Okay, peptic ulcer. 50-year-old male presents to the ED following a few months of intermittent epigastric abdominal pain that's become dramatically worse in the last few hours. Upon examination, he's tachycardic and hypotensive, hemodynamically unstable, potentially mild fever, it's afebrile, it's less than 38, and he has rebound tenderness and guarding, which are signs of peritonitis. My provisional diagnosis, given the presence of epigastric pain and hemodynamic instability with associated peritonitic signs, is that of a peptic or duodenal ulcer. I'd like to exclude life threats, which include inferior myocardial infarct, pancreatitis, and vascular pathologies, including aortic dissection and abdominal aortic aneurysm. Other causes of abdominal or upper abdominal pain may include generalized gastritis. We've mentioned pancreatitis. Also concerned about biliary pathology, such as a biliary colic, renal pathology, such as pyelonephritis. Given the patient's age, I'm concerned about malignancy, and other life threats could include mesenteric ischemia that I'd like to exclude in an elderly male. Gourd, Boerhaave as well as that we can mention. What investigations would you perform? Well, the diagnostic investigation for a peptic ulcer would be that of a abdominal x-ray looking for pneumoperitoneum, which could be secondary to the perforation. Bedside investigations would include ECG to look for any evidence of MI, and then possibly blood glucose as well, just given the patient is maybe quite, blood glucose as well, to assess any impairment associated with pancreatitis. I'd like to also do a full blood count, CRP, looking for any evidence of infection, leukocytosis, and given that I'm concerned about hypovolemic shock secondary to a gastric or duodenal bleed, I'm looking for hemoglobin that's dropped as well. I could also do LFTs just for baseline and also to exclude biliary pathology, as the patient may be going for surgery soon. Given the patient's going for surgery, we may also like to do a coags, cross-match, especially given the patient is hemodynamically unstable, and we may also like to get troponins to exclude a diagnosis of MI. A chest x-ray would also be useful to exclude lower lobe pneumonia, and if inconclusive, we may proceed to a CT abdomen to look for malignancy. Why has he changed the pain he experienced? So generalized epigastric pain is caused by visceral peritonitis, and this is derived from somatic mesoderm, which is part of your lateral plate mesoderm, and thus it gets a visceral supply is your visceral peritoneum is embryologically derived from lateral plate splanchnic mesoderm, and it has a sympathetic supply, and thus we have poor localization of pain. However, your parietal peritoneum is derived from your lateral plate somatic mesoderm, and thus it has a somatic nerve supply and is much more localized. And this localized pain can cause associated rigidity of the muscles that are directly anterior to it, and that's why we see signs of peritonism. List the reflections of the peritoneum. Well, the peritoneum itself is a double layer of mesothelium, which is simple squamous epithelium, and it lines the abdominal wall, and it reflects to form visceral peritoneum. It has three main functions. It reduces and localizes infection. It also secretes fluid to reduce friction, and it allows free mobility of the abdominal organs, and enables their suspension to the abdominal wall. The reflections of the peritoneum, so it's your parietal peritoneum and it's reflected into visceral peritoneum, and there also consists of structures that arise from peritoneum, and this includes omentum, mesentery, and ligaments. And your mesentery is derived from, mesentery is double fold of peritoneum that suspends your intestines. So the mesentery suspends the small intestines. The mesocolon, there's a transverse and sigmoid mesocolon, which will suspend the, and mesoappendix, which will suspend those intestinal structures. And the omentum refers to double layer of peritoneum that suspends the stomach. And we have a greater and lesser omentum. The greater omentum is an apron of fatty connective tissue and also consists of ligaments, so it's connected to the greater curvature of the stomach with the gastrocolic, and left laterally, we also have the gastrosplenic ligaments, and it will then attach to the transverse colon. The lesser omentum consists of two ligaments, the gastrohepatic and hepatoduodenal ligaments. What if there was abdominal trauma where the blood pool? Given most duodenal ulcers, so if we are considering bleeding with the duodenal ulcers, this is likely to be posterior duodenal ulcers and posterior gastric ulcers, and this can cause bleeding of the gastroduodenal artery, or less likely the superior pancreatic or duodenal artery. The blood may then travel anteriorly and fall into likely to the greater sac. And the greater sac is a space between the abdominal visci and the abdominal wall, and it's divided into there's a superior colic segment and an inferior colic segment, and that's divided by the transverse mesocolon. The lesser sac is formed by the space between the lesser omentum and the greater omentum, and there's likely to be a bleed here as it's a small location. There's also maybe blood pooling into the paracolic gutters if sufficient quantity. List the relations of the duodenum. The duodenum is proximally connected to the pylorus of the stomach and distally to the jejunum. The duodenum first 2.5 centimeters is intraperitoneal, and the remainder of the duodenum is retroperitoneal. And it consists of 4 segments from D1 to D2. The first segment travels superiorly, I believe, and the first segment D1 is superior to it we have the liver, and posterior to it we can see the inferior vena cava. D2 will then travel D1 travels transverse, D2 will travel inferiorly, and posterior to it we'll have the kidneys, and anterior to it we will see the transverse colon. D3 will anteriorly have the superior mesenteric artery and vein traveling over it, and posteriorly we may see the inferior vena cava. And D4 will travel superior, and posteriorly we'll see the aorta, and anteriorly we will see the stomach. What are the complications of peritonitis? It may cause abscess formation due to spread of infection. There may also be sepsis, septic shock, and death, and it's very low prognosis. The duodenum, foregut, or midgut? Well, it really depends. The duodenum to the major duodenal papillae is foregut, and his innervated celiac artery is supplied, and the remainder is a midgut structure. Blood supply to the duodenum, well, the first 2.5 centimeters is supplied by the gastroduodenal artery, and it's branched the right gastroepiploic artery, and the remainder of the duodenum is supplied by the superior pancreatic or duodenal artery and the inferior pancreatic or duodenal artery. The nerve plexi, since it's a foregut structure, it's supplied by the celiac plexus and superior mesenteric plexus, and parasympathetically, there is a posterior vagal trunk. Oh, I got that. And we've finished. Alright, we're done. We are officially done. Okay, let me just answer questions. What field of medicine am I considering doing? The eternal question. Okay, we're done, everyone. Thank you for joining. I will need to get some rest so I can make it to hospital in time. Thanks for joining. I hope you got some work done with me.